Thank you for attending and welcome. So for some of you guys who don't know who we are at Lean Focus, we are passionate, collaborative, and straightforward people who care about you, your business, as it was our own. Our vision is to build lasting continuous improvement cultures that create strategic advantage for our clients. Our mission is to change old way of thinking, be fact-based, radically candid, and deeply committed to delivering breakthrough results. And our values are really simple. We respect every individual, we practice humble leadership, we're focused on Gemba, and we set the high expectations. One more thing to add is that on our team, there are no junior associates. Everybody on our team has 20+ years of Lean experience, and that's one of the major differentiators for us between our competition. These are some companies that we have worked with or are working with currently. And how we create value for our clients is through growth, profit increase, and working capital improvements. We do that through our Lean Focused business system. Our Lean Focused business system is comprised of 5 elements: guiding principles, foundational system, growth, lean, and leadership. Today, we're going to talk about 6S and visual management. That's part of a foundational system. From JB Pico perspective, you guys have access to all of the foundational tools. So everything that you see under the foundational system is available to you. Please reach out to your CI department and they can share that with you. So some of the expectations for today's training. So there's no expectations of perfection. These webinars are put together to keep us moving during these challenging times where we cannot be together in the same room practicing it. So it's a 1-hour session. What we're hoping for is that there are bits and pieces that you can learn from this, that there's few takeaways that you can learn and implement in your current 5 or 6S process. And or if you have not started yet, maybe there are some things that you've learned here that you can start and try, and then reach out to your CI department, and with them and through them, we can help coach and guide along the way. Anything new that we learn, a new process, a new tool, we go through this process of learning, doing, and teaching. During the learning phase, there's a lot of confusion and struggle, which is to be expected, and we understand that, and we want to encourage our teammates to continue learning by doing, because that's really the only way that we can learn something. So we understand that there's going to be confusion and struggle. In the same time, we understand that the best way to learn is by doing something. Once we start doing it, we start putting in the reps, we start getting better at it, and along our way of putting in the reps, we get some coaching and we apply some self-reflection so we can improve upon new processes and tools that we are learning. As we do that, we become teachers, and then we are the ones that are creating practitioners and reinforcing the culture. I'm going to walk us through the implementation of a 6X process. So what we see here is the summary. We start with safety, moving on to sort, setting in order, shining, standardizing, and sustaining. Some companies use 5S, some companies use 6S. Both, irregardless of the company, companies are focused on both cleanliness, organization, and safety. So some companies use 5S, and safety is part of normal standard operating procedures, and some companies are involving it in 6S. Either way, if we were to remove safety, the process steps between sorting, setting in order, shining, standardizing, and sustaining would be the same as 5S. So just kind of to touch base, what is the difference between 5S and 6S? It starts with lean fundamentals, and 6S is really one of the basics that without, it's really hard to proceed forward. So some of the lean fundamental thinking and things to remember. Number one is when we are working on lean, we always want to specify the value from the standpoint of the customer. So what is it that the customer values and what is it that they're willing to pay for? And then it's our job to identify all the steps that are necessary to create each product and service. Once we do that, we're focusing on eliminating non-value-add activities and wastes and simplifying whenever possible those steps that do not create value. Once we do that, next step is to transform the processes so that value creating steps can occur in a tighter sequence so the product can flow smoothly and faster. As we introduce flow, we introduce concept of pull versus push. The example to think about is that if I'm working in a production line and I'm doing a one-piece flow, the person that comes after me would be the person that would pull from my area, which would create a signal for me to make something new. In this case, that can be a department, a person downstream, and we would wait for them to pull to create a signal for us to make the next part. Once we introduce pull and we start pulling in our process, the next step is really to look at how we are organized. And we will look at how can we convert our processes, departments, value streams, so we can eliminate as many waste as possible, improve communication, and put problem-solving teams together to drive systemic problem-solving and improvements in our areas. So in summary, lean thinking starts with clearly identifying the value from customer perspective, learning how to see and identify the wastes, and relentlessly and continually eliminate waste or reduce non-value-add activities. The whole objective here is to create visual methods so that we can work smarter and not harder. So that being said, thinking about some lean principles and 6S, when we look at this table, this workstation ahead of us, what can we see? And what is it that we cannot see? Anybody? Any volunteers? What can you guys see? Can you guys hear me okay?
A really messy workspace.
It's a really messy workspace, exactly.
And what you don't see maybe is the inefficiencies that it drives. Finding stuff, not knowing if you have what you need. Maybe the technician is actually out on a hunt right now looking for things because he's or she is not there either.
Exactly. So it's messy. We can't tell what's needed, what's not needed. Can we tell what's being made here?
Looks like electronics of some sort.
Right now.
Right. We have to guess. It's hard to tell what's being made. It's hard to tell what's needed. If we think about it, do we think that this person who is working in this area will be efficient and effective?
No.
Exactly. No. Now, if we were to go to our back offices and to our manufacturing areas, and if we have something similar, if we would ask our teammates, do they think if that's working for them or if they are efficient and effective by having this type of organization, what do you think they'll tell us?
They'll probably say they know where everything is that they need.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So our job is to help teach and coach them along the way with some examples, with some areas that we start with, so that they can learn how much more efficient and effective and how much their job will be easier. Our jobs would be easier if we are organized in a proper way. So good comments. So that said, another important reason for 6S is really to create predictability. What we're trying to do, we're trying to be able to predict that the plans that we are putting in place will be able to execute. It helps us control the variables within our environment and our control. It helps us quickly and visually identify when something is going wrong. And it really helps us put countermeasures in place so that we can improve our work environment and become more predictive. I'm going to go into details on how to implement each step of the 6S process next. So on this slide, I'm showing some pictures of challenges and some safety observations. Depending on what type of manufacturing or back office we have, in this case, primarily in the operations and storage areas, we have some challenges with storage not being organized. Even if it's organized, it's not identified, so sometimes we don't know what's inside. Hazardous chemicals can cause some problems if we don't store and identify things properly. Right? On the lower hand corner, we have some spills. We got some partials that are stored on top. We got some tools and supply storages that are messy and not really doing a good job. So all these things that we can see from visual management, the safety observations, do we think that these areas would help us and aid us in becoming more efficient, working safer, producing better quality? Or do you think that this would slow us down?
Looks like it would slow us down.
I think it would slow us down too.
Exactly, right? Because we have to look for stuff. You know, if there's spills, we gotta spend time cleaning it up. We gotta move things around, look for things. All those things are wastes that make our jobs harder. So with the safety step, we try to eliminate that. How we do that is we start by assessing our areas for ergonomics and working conditions, whether it's in a manufacturing area, operations, or back office. So we would look for ergonomics, make sure that all hazardous materials is stored properly, make sure all tools are accessible, make sure there's no power cords laying down, whatever can trip us, and so forth. Once we do that, next step in our process is to design our work areas so that they are easy to work in. Some of the examples are adjustable tables. We can have fatigue mats for the areas that we are standing a long time. We can improve lighting conditions so there's no fatigue on the eyes, which can cause lack of focus and so forth. So after we start assessing each area, whether it's in a back office or manufacturing, we would use job safety analysis worksheet to document what we observed and review what our current standard work is. Once we understand those, we will start applying countermeasures for the areas of concern. And this sheet will help us identify what are the high, moderate, and low risk areas that we want to address first. So any questions on safety? Why is safety so important, and how to go about assessing our work areas? If safety is pretty clear, we're going to move on to the next step in our process, which is sorting. During the sorting process of our areas, first question that comes to mind, well, where do we start? So most of us in our lifetime have moved from either one apartment to another, from one house to another, from house into the apartment or apartment to house, either way. Either way, I think when we move, we start packing stuff up and we recognize that over a period of time, we have accumulated things that we really don't need and we don't use that much anymore. And that's normal and natural human behavior. Well, same thing happens in our business. Over time, we accumulate things that sometimes were needed and used, that our processes have changed and we don't need them or use them anymore. And this helps us kind of sort through things just like we would while we're moving. What can we keep? What should we keep? And what is it that we don't need anymore? One question that we ask ourselves is, how often do we use it? If the answer is we use it often and we need it, then we keep it. And the answer is no, then we would put it aside, we would put a red tag on it so we can evaluate further whether it's appropriate to discard that item or not. Why is sorting important? Well, if you think about it, everything that we accumulate is going to take space. Once it does, we're going to have to work around that space, whether we move it to get to something or we have to walk or drive around it to get to something that we need. It will take us more time because we have it. It's costing us money. It really requires a lot of energy that can be used in other areas. So there's a lot of waste and inefficiencies that come with the accumulation of stuff that's just sitting there that we don't need anymore. Once we eliminate that, it also helps us with increasing our product quality as well as productivity. So how would we go about it? So we as a team would look at our area. Maybe we have 5 different areas. Maybe if we're in a back office, there's 20 cubicles. We would decide as a team, where do we start first? Once we decide where we start first, we would pull everything out of that cell and we would separate necessary from unnecessary. Once we have our necessary items, those are the items that will go back in our work areas, and unnecessary items would be the ones that we would red tag and identify for future investigation. While we're doing so, it's recommended that we have bins or areas that are clearly marked so that the stuff that we never use can go in appropriate location. Stuff that we'll use someday can go in separate location, and stuff that we use a lot would go in a separate location as well. This helps us understand what is the high usage versus low usage, which will help us organize ourselves in the most efficient and effective manner. So here is an example of an area before sorting and after sorting. So when we look at the picture of before and after, what are some differences that we can see?
Work center is organized, not labeled.
Not labeled. What else?
Looks like there was a lot of things moved out of that area that were on that cart.
All necessary items on the work center, unnecessary items removed off the work center on from the table too.
Exactly. So we can see that even though potentially we have everything that we need in the before picture on the cart that's right next to our workbench, it's really organized to what is necessary, and it's really right in front of us to what we really need to use, and stuff that is not necessarily on a daily basis is probably put aside close by. Excellent. Once we have evaluated our areas for ergonomics and different potential safety challenges, and we have removed unnecessary items that we need, the next step is to set in order the items that are needed. So how do we do that, and what do we do? So the items that we deem necessary, we would arrange so that the ones that we are using most often are right ahead of us. We don't have to walk away to get it. We don't have to reach up. We don't have to bend down. So they are right in front of us because we're using them the most often on a daily basis. Once we identify and arrange those, we want to label them so that anyone can tell whether they're in the right location. And when we are using tools, we can put it back in their appropriate location. Why would we do this? Well, it really helps eliminate a lot of different wastes. And I just talked about some, and one of them is looking for tools, getting up from our work areas, whether it's office or manufacturing area, looking for stuff, trying to find it. It eliminates all the excess inventory, eliminates unsafe conditions, and so forth. So there's really a lot of benefits to setting it in order. So how would we do that? We would use the categories that we created in sort. We would look at our location now that we have all the items back, and we would refine it, where each item would go. We would also refine what is the number of items required. Do I need more than one cleaning supply? Do I need more than one wrench, more than one screwdriver, more than 2 pens? Whatever it is, we would agree on. Once we do that, it would be right in front of us, as I mentioned before, is that daily items should be within our arm's reach and where it's used, and items that we're not using on daily basis would be stored nearby in a properly stored and labeled location so that we can retrieve them with moderate effort. Here we can see an example of before and after setting in order of the area. So what are some of the things that we can see on the before and after pictures?
In the after picture, everything's got its own place.
Hey, too many screwdrivers.
So on the before picture, we may have all the tools that we need within our reach, right? Would I, as an operator in this area, still be effective? Would it take me still a while to find the right screwdriver for the job?
Yes.
Absolutely. So if you think about it, once we remove necessary and unnecessary, we're starting to look more on a micro level to, okay, now that it's necessary, how do I still retrieve something, pretty fast? And I believe at JB Pico, you guys have a rule of 5 seconds to be able to find a tool and use it. So when we see that, it's probably going to take us more than 5 seconds on the before picture, where after, it's what we need, where we need it, and it's really easy to find it and use it. So this will be an example of before and after we would set in order our area. Any questions on setting in order? How would it look like and how we would go about it? We're pretty clear. Once we have removed unnecessary items and we have placed them in a proper order where we need them, the next step is to shine our areas. How we would do that is we would set up a appropriate frequency for everything that's in our area to be cleaned and maintained. Some of those things may need to be done on hourly, every shift, daily, weekly, or monthly basis. It really depends what is the work area that we are working in. Why would we want to shine our area? Well, once we shine our area, it really becomes a lot more pleasurable to work in, and it brings more joy to our teammates and ourselves. It helps us keeping all the tools and benches, work areas in the condition that we need it. It avoids unnecessary breakdowns, and it really helps with making problems visible so that we can easily see when something is out of control and out of the order that we can take action on. So what we would do is we would use this activity to make sure that all of our equipment, materials, and tools are properly stored, as well as maintained and operational. We would deep clean everything in our area to the standards that is acceptable to us. We would also look at our area and design it so it can be easily maintained. If our area is designed with a lot of crevices and areas where stuff can accumulate and it's not easy to clean, probably over time, we're going to have a hard time sustaining it and continuously cleaning it. And the last step is eliminate sources of dirt and contamination. So I've been to a couple of sites within JBPeco. I was so far with Morgan in Morgantown and with TAG in Elkhart. So I'm not sure if we got anybody from Morgantown or Elkhart. When we're thinking about sources of contamination, what are some challenges that we have that we can talk about? Do we have anybody from Morgantown or Elkhart on the call?
Yeah, sawdust one, grinding dust.
Absolutely. So during our Gamba walk in Elkhart, what we were able to observe was the biggest challenge for the company is repair and rework. It's really slowing us down and creates a lot of waste. And by walking the line and observing, we were able to observe that areas where we grind the truck beds, where we apply the fiberglass, are really in close proximity where the paint shop is, as well as having the vents and fans blowing in different directions. So it stirs up the dust and it's just floating everywhere, right? So one area is depositing dirt and dust to the area where we're continually trying to clean before it goes in a paint booth. And as a result, 100% of the truck beds are being reworked afterwards because every truck bed is being buffed. So when we would look at our areas, we would look at what are some ways, how can we eliminate contaminants to minimize the rework and repair, which will make our life easier and will become, it's going to become safer area. It's going to be a lot easier to work. We don't have to work as much, and it's going to become more productive and profitable with better quality. So there are two steps. Number one, we would deep clean area to the level that is acceptable to us in our site. And then we would set up an inspection where we would inspect equipment and tools to make sure they're in a proper working order. So any questions on how to shine, what to shine, and what are some benefits from shining our areas? If that's pretty clear, we're going to move on to standardize. So now we have evaluated ourselves for safety. We have removed necessary from unnecessary. We have taken necessary items and placed them in a close proximity so that we can retrieve them easily. And we have cleaned our area and labeled our area. So now we know what is where and when something is missing. The next step is to standardize it. So standardizing it helps us create visual standard that we can manage. If we don't standardize it, then areas within our site, within our business units can be different, and it's really going to be challenging for us to be able to tell what's right and what's wrong, if you may, meaning, well, which area is being maintained properly and which one isn't, because they all look different. So it becomes really hard. So why would we do this? Well, it integrates sorting, setting in order, and shining into one unified whole. It ensures that new conditions do not deteriorate and go back, right? And it really helps us implement previous 3 S's. So some examples of how we would go about it. We as a company or as a business unit or as a site would have standard set of colors, floor marking. We would mark production flow in a certain way, information flow. We would post rules and expectations. We would use shadow boards and pictures to help us identify when something's out of the order. And we would set up the rules on how would we go about managing the abnormalities. Here is an example on how that would look like. So we would have, on the left-hand side, we have set colors. In the middle column is what we would use it. And on the right-hand side is some examples of where we would use it. So in this example here, the yellow color would mean permanent location of the work areas, traffic lanes, and storage areas. And examples where we would use it would be aisleways, traffic lines, perimeters of a cell. So if I'm from previous sessions, I understand that we do have a standard from JVPCO perspective, and that either CI team or safety team members can share that with us and make it easily accessible. So that's a really good thing because we have a standard set of colors that we use across the sites and across the company. So any questions on standardizing, how we would do it, why is it important, and what are some benefits? Once we standardize it, we can able to see it and manage it better. That moves us on to the next step, which is sustaining all the hard work that we have done. We all know that sustainment is the hardest part on anything that we do, really. And it really is a teamwork effort, and it's not a lone wolf activity, because as a single individual, we will never be able to sustain it for a really long period of time. So what we want to do is we really want to make it a habit of properly maintaining our areas and maintaining our procedures. It helps with instilling the discipline necessary to avoid backsliding. There will usually be a mix of positive and negative reinforcement, if you may. So we want to try having a positive way of how to sustain our areas, how to celebrate it and reward people. Sometimes we'll need to use negative consequences as well. It ensures stability and simplification, which is foundation, which upon we can improve. And we know that layer audits, random audits are really the best to help us sustain something in the long term. So the simplest way to sustain something is First of all, to involve the team during the safety and sorting, really all of the phases of the 5 or 6S. And then once that team has put the work into improving our areas, they have more reasons to why we should sustain it because of all the hard work that we have done. Our job as the leaders is to support them by routinely engaging with them as well as auditing the process. When we as the leaders, whether we are walking through back office or we are walking through manufacturing areas, when we see files stacked up on top of each other all over the place, when we see papers on the floor, when we see markers everywhere, when we see metal parts everywhere, if we don't say something, then we are saying that the current condition that we have is acceptable. So it's really important that we as leaders, when we see something, we say something, which will tell the rest of our teammates that we really care about it and it's important. It is also recommended that our teammates take part in the audit process, which really helps create that peer-to-peer pressure. And as I talked about, it's really important if we can set up a positive reinforcement so we can share gratitude and success in the areas that we're doing really well. In order to sustain it, it really needs to be visual and it needs to be at the point of use. Otherwise, it's going to be hard for people to understand what needs to be where and why should I sustain something when stuff is not close to me when being used. So making it visual and at a point of use is really the key. Any questions on sustainment? Why is it important and how we would go about it? If sustainment is pretty clear, next step in the process is setting a visual management. These are the 5 elements that are critical. It starts with leader standard work, daily management, visual controls, checklists and audits, and Gemba walks. When we do all of the 5 elements and we stick with it, we develop a team and a company culture. So these are some examples of the visual controls in the back office. In the upper left-hand corner, we can see the layout of our office. The cubicles are waist high, so we all can see how our areas look like. Within our cubicles, our drawers are organized, so our markers, pens, calculators are properly stored. Everything is in its place. And we can see on the lower left corner the items that we're not using on a daily basis, but that our storage areas are properly labeled and maintained. And when we look down to the right lower corner, this is our software part of our work. So it's not just important that we maintain and organize our physical areas. It's also important that we keep our computer space, if you may, organized and maintained. If I'm an engineer and I store documents a certain way, and there's 20 of us, and all 20 of us are storing it in different areas, and we're using different naming convention, for somebody who's looking for a certain spec or requirement, it's really going to be confusing, and we're going to be spending a lot of time trying to find it. So how we apply 5 and 6S inside of our computers is as important as setting it up in our physical areas. As I mentioned before, checklists and audits are highly effective. Random checks and audits are most effective. However, some standard work and every time using a checklist is really important. An example here is looking at the pilots. and using a checklist each and every time to remind them what are all the things we should check so we don't forget anything. When we are implementing 6S, it's really important that we build it into our process so that it doesn't become an thing on what we do, but it's part of our daily work and daily routine. That helps from problems reappearing, builds improvements into the process, and future monitoring becomes unnecessary or a lot easier. So when we're thinking about success process and how we maintain it, it's really important that our teammates understand that part of our 8-hour workday or 10-hour workday, whatever our standards are, that we have dedicated amount of time for cleaning as we go, for cleaning maybe at the beginning of the shift, middle, or the end of the shift, or every day. This is where developing a schedule and calendar is very, very important. So in summary, I walked us through a 6S process that started with safety, evaluating ergonomics and different challenges in our area, sorting everything out, removing necessary from unnecessary. Once we know what's necessary, we would set it in order so it's easily retrievable for the items that are needed on a daily basis. Then we would look at our areas and shine it. We would also standardize it so it helps us to sustain it. So this is the 6-step process on the journey. And as I mentioned before, as any other process or new learning, we go through process of learning, doing, and teaching. There's normal confusion and struggle during the learning process. That's to be expected. And really, we want to encourage everyone to learn by doing it, where we understand it's not going to be perfect. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking to try it and make it better. And once we start putting in the reps, the CI team and myself through them will help you, guide you along the way so that we can develop into the teachers, and we are the ones creating practitioners and reinforcing the culture. If you are interested more learning about 5S by yourself, some self-learning, these are recommended books. You can also sign up for our quarterly newsletter at Lean Focus. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. This is where we post articles. This is where we post the latest lessons learned. And you can pick up bits and pieces on what you can use to maybe apply in your areas, maybe make things better and make your job and life easier. So with that, we have about 15 minutes, and I would like to turn that over to any questions in regards to how to implement success successfully. Was this helpful?
Yes.
So as I mentioned before, we're doing this 1-hour webinar to keep us fresh. I know that most, if not all, Jimmy Pico companies already have a 5S process in place. I believe we are in a different stages of the process in different business units and sites. This webinar is really for us to talk and share any ideas, bring up any questions. There are no stupid or wrong questions. This is really to help us keep us going and answer any questions that we have.
I have a question. So internally, when you're doing this for your production floor, when you're trying to standardize a work center with what tools they need to have, does that come under the sort or the standardized portion?
So to me, that would come under the sorting portion and setting it in order. right? It's going to become a standard anyway, but what we want to do is we want to figure out what are the tools that we use more often. And then once we're setting them in order, which ones are the ones that need to be within our hands reach, and which ones are the ones that we need on a monthly basis that can be stored close by.
So basically, we are trying to make a standardized checklist to make sure any of the leads go into the work areas, looking at their workbenches or standardized shadow boards to ensure all the tools are back in place. All that would be a work in process towards going towards standardize and then coming back to sort and saying, okay, so and so is sorted so and so way, but in the standardized form or standardized way we are going to use to check, ensure you're setting it in order and sorting it and shining it would be based off your standardized form, correct?
Correct. Are there any questions to that comment? Do you guys understand it?
Yeah, very clear and straightforward and easy to understand, grasp and learn. The only input I have is the way I train team members, especially on the shop floor. The perfect example I give for 5S is their own very own house kitchen. That's the best example I can ever give anybody is see your house kitchen. If I'm asking you for a fork, you're not gonna search your house. You know exactly which drawer of your kitchen you can find a fork or a knife. So
That's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that.
yep.
Anyone else? Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for joining our webinar. As I mentioned before, you can download this when you click under the handouts on your dashboard. Also, if you need it, your CI team can send it over to you, as well as getting a full training. Any other questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Enjoy your day and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.